The Helios Gate materialized before them like a wound in space itself, a shimmering portal of distorted light and gravity that connected two distant regions of the galaxy. Jake had passed through it dozens of times during routine patrols, always marveling at the ancient technology that made such instantaneous travel possible. Today he barely noticed its beauty. His attention was fixed entirely on the 1,000 warships that surrounded it like a metal wall. The Vakresh fleet hung in formation, their vessels dark and angular, designed to inspire fear as much as to wage war. Each ship bristled with weapons, their hulls covered in armor plating that could withstand direct hits from nuclear warheads. The smallest vessels in their fleet outmassed the Defiant by a factor of 3. The largest were mobile fortresses capable of reducing a planet's surface to molten glass. Jake felt a familiar calm settle over him, the same clarity he had experienced before every major decision in his life. Fear was useless now. Only action mattered. "Drop us out of faster-than-light travel at maximum weapons range," he ordered. Amy's fingers flew across her console, exiting in 3, 2, 1. The Defiant lurched slightly as it transitioned back into normal space, its sensors immediately flooding with data about the enemy fleet. Jake watched as the tactical display updated, showing firing solutions, threat assessments, and projected damage patterns. The computer helpfully informed him that their odds of survival were less than 1%. He dismissed the warning with a flick of his hand. "Incoming transmission," Kelly announced. "It is High Admiral Thren himself." Jake straightened in his chair, on screen. The view screen flickered, and a face appeared that Jake had only seen in intelligence briefings. High Admiral Thren was a Vakresh, a species that resembled something between a reptile and an insect, with compound eyes that gleamed like polished black stones and mandibles that clicked together when he spoke. His skin was a deep purple, marked with scars that told of countless battles. When he saw Jake, his mandibles spread in what might have been a smile or a threat display. "A single human ship," Thren said, his voice translated by the computer into flat, emotionless English. "I was told your species valued logic and reason." "This seems neither logical nor reasonable, Commander." Jake kept his expression neutral. "High Admiral Thren, I am Commander Jake Morrison of the USS Defiant. I am here to deliver a message from humanity." Thren's eyes seemed to glitter with amusement. "A message? How quaint." "Very well, human. Deliver your message before I erase you from existence." Jake leaned forward slightly. "Humanity does not kneel. Not to empires. Not to tyrants. Not to anyone." The words hung in the silence of the bridge. Thren stared at him for a long moment, and then a sound emerged from his mandibles that the computer struggled to translate. It settled on laughter. "You come before a fleet of 1,000 warships with a single vessel, and you speak of defiance. Your bravery borders on insanity, Commander. I will offer you one chance. Surrender now. I promise you and your crew an honorable captivity. You will be treated well. This is more mercy than your species deserves." Jake shook his head slowly. "I decline your generous offer, Admiral. The Defiant will not surrender. If you want this gate, you will have to go through us." Thren's amusement vanished, replaced by cold calculation. "So be it, human. You have chosen death. I will at least ensure it is quick." The transmission ended abruptly. Jake turned to Amy. "Time to show them what one human ship can do. Fire at will, Lieutenant." Amy's hands moved with practiced precision. Railgun batteries online. Missile tubes loaded. Target lock acquired on lead vessels firing. The Defiant shuddered as its weapon systems unleashed hell. Twin railguns mounted on the ship's dorsal surface fired magnetically accelerated slugs at a significant fraction of light speed. The projectiles crossed the distance to the nearest Vakresh ships in seconds, punching through their armor with kinetic energy that made explosives seem gentle. 3 ships died in the opening salvo, their hulls crumpling like paper as the railgun rounds tore through vital systems. Missiles followed, smart weapons that wove through space on pillars of fire, their guidance systems locked onto the signatures of enemy vessels. The Vakresh fleet, caught off guard by the sudden aggression, scrambled to respond. Point defense systems came online, filling space with streams of laser fire designed to intercept incoming missiles. Most of the missiles died in the defensive barrage, but 7 reached their targets. Nuclear fireballs bloomed against the darkness, each one consuming a Vakresh warship in an instant of impossible heat and light. 10 ships down, Amy reported, her voice tight with concentration. "They are returning fire." "Evasive maneuvers," Jake ordered. Danny, give me everything the engines have. The Defiant rolled and twisted as Danny pushed the engines beyond their design specifications. Vakresh weapons fire filled the space where the ship had been moments before. Energy beams capable of vaporizing steel missed by meters. Kinetic rounds large enough to destroy small asteroids passed harmlessly by the ship's hull. Jake watched the tactical display with the focus of a chess master analyzing a board. The Vakresh fleet was moving to surround them, trying to bring their superior numbers to bear. He could not allow that. All power to forward shields, he ordered. Take us into the debris field from that destroyed station. Amy looked at him in surprise. Sir, the debris field is a navigation hazard. We could collide with something. Jake smiled grimly. So could they. And they have a lot more ships to worry about losing. The Defiant plunged into the cloud of wreckage that orbited the Helios Gate, the remnants of an ancient alien station destroyed in some long-forgotten war. Chunks of metal and stone, some as large as houses, drifted in chaotic patterns. The Defiant's sensors painted them as red hazards on the display. Jake ignored the warnings and pushed deeper into the field. Behind them, the Vakresh fleet hesitated. Thren was cautious now, no longer willing to throw his ships recklessly forward. They are spreading out, trying to flank us through the debris field, Amy reported. Jake nodded. He had anticipated this. Target the largest debris fragments with our railguns. Turn them into shrapnel. Amy understood immediately. The railguns fired, not at enemy ships but at the floating wreckage around them. Each impact sent thousands of smaller fragments spinning in unpredictable directions, creating an expanding cloud of high-velocity debris. Vakresh ships entering the field from multiple angles suddenly found themselves navigating a minefield of metal, moving at lethal speeds. 4 more enemy vessels died, their hulls punctured by debris they could not avoid. The Vakresh fleet pulled back slightly, regrouping. Jake used the moment to catch his breath. Status report, he called out. Shields at 70%, Amy replied. Minor damage to the port side from a glancing hit, but nothing critical. Ammunition reserves at 85%. Danny's voice came through the intercom. Engines are running hot, Commander, but they will hold. Just tell me where you want to go. Jake studied the tactical display, his mind racing through possibilities. The Vakresh had numbers, but they were used to fighting enemies who stood still and traded blows. Human naval doctrine emphasized movement, unpredictability, and making the enemy fight on your terms. He thought about the old Earth wars, about submarine commanders who used cunning to defeat superior forces. The principle was the same, even if the ocean was now made of vacuum and stars. Kelly, open a channel, Jake ordered. I want every ship in that fleet to hear this. Kelly nodded and activated the general broadcast. Channel open, sir. Jake stood from his chair and faced the view screen, knowing that hundreds of thousands of Vakresh were watching and listening. Hi, Admiral Thren. You have now lost 14 ships to 1 human vessel. I suggest you reconsider your ultimatum to Earth. This is your first and only warning. Leave human space now, or I will continue to destroy your fleet 1 ship at a time. The response came quickly, Thren's voice vibrating with anger. You have merely annoyed me, human. You cannot win. Mathematics does not lie. 1 ship cannot defeat 1,000. Jake smiled. You are right, Admiral. 1 ship cannot defeat 1,000 in a fair fight. Fortunately for us, humans stopped fighting fair a long time ago. He cut the transmission and turned to Amy. Target their communications hub ships. I want to blind them. The Defiant burst from the debris field like a predator from cover, its weapons already firing. Amy had identified 3 vessels in the Vakresh fleet that served as communications relays, coordinating the movements of hundreds of other ships. They were heavily defended but poorly armored, designed for command rather than combat. The Defiant's missiles streaked across space, and this time the element of surprise worked in humanity's favor. 2 of the 3 communications ships died before they could react. The third took a direct railgun hit that left it tumbling, its systems dark. Chaos erupted in the Vakresh fleet. Ships that had been moving in coordinated patterns suddenly fell out of formation, their commanders unable to communicate effectively with each other. Jake pressed the advantage. Take us through their formation, full speed. Target any ship that gets in our way. The Defiant accelerated, plunging directly into the heart of the enemy fleet. It was a maneuver born of desperation and audacity. The Vakresh had expected the human ship to run or hide, to play defensively and die slowly. Instead, the hours blurred together into a continuous cycle of violence and survival. Jake had lost track of how long the Defiant had been fighting. The ship's chronometer told him it had been 18 hours since the first engagement, but time had ceased to have meaning. There was only the next attack, the next evasion, the next desperate gambit to stay alive one more minute. The debris field had become their hunting ground and their refuge. Jake knew every cluster of wreckage, every trajectory of floating metal. The Defiant would emerge from hiding, strike with precision at exposed enemy vessels, and then vanish back into the chaos before the Vakresh could coordinate a response. It was exhausting work that demanded absolute concentration from every crew member. One mistake, one moment of inattention, and they would all die. Amy slumped in her chair, her face pale with fatigue. She had been at her station for the entire battle, refusing relief despite Jake's orders. Her hands still moved across the controls with mechanical efficiency, but Jake could see the exhaustion in her eyes. Around the bridge, the rest of the crew looked equally worn. Kelly had dark circles under her eyes. Even Danny, who usually maintained an upbeat attitude, looked gray and haggard. Ammunition status, Jake asked for the 100th time. Amy checked her displays. Railgun rounds at 42%. Missiles down to 18%. We are running on fumes, Commander. Jake nodded grimly. They had known this moment would come. A single ship could only carry so much ammunition, and they had been fighting continuously for nearly a day. Every shot had to count now. The tactical display showed the Vakresh fleet's current disposition. They had pulled back from the debris field and formed a defensive perimeter, their ships arranged in layers that would make any attack costly. Jake had destroyed over 200 of their vessels through hit-and-run tactics, guerrilla warfare on a cosmic scale. The Vakresh had paid in blood for every meter of space. But Jake also knew the mathematics. 200 down meant 800 remained. The odds had improved, but they were still impossible. Commander, we are receiving multiple transmissions from the Vakresh fleet, Kelly said. They are broadcasting on all frequencies. It is the same message repeated over and over. Jake frowned. What does it say? Kelly's expression was puzzled. It is a question, sir. They are asking how one ship can fight like this. They want to know what makes humans different. Jake felt a strange mix of emotions. Pride, certainly. Satisfaction that they had made the enemy question themselves. But also a deep weariness. What makes humans different, he thought. We are stubborn. We are clever. We refuse to accept that some battles cannot be won. He did not share these thoughts with the crew. Instead, he focused on the immediate problem. Danny's voice crackled over the intercom, thick with exhaustion. Commander, we have a serious problem. The reactor core is degrading faster than I can repair it. We have been running at combat power for too long. I need to shut down non-essential systems to keep the engines and shields operational. Jake closed his eyes briefly. This was the beginning of the end. Once systems started failing, it was only a matter of time before something critical broke at exactly the wrong moment. Do what you need to do, Jake replied. Keep us flying as long as you can. He turned to Amy. We need to change our strategy. We cannot keep trading shots with them. We need something that will hurt them badly enough to make them reconsider this entire invasion. Amy looked at him with bloodshot eyes. What did you have in mind, sir? Jake pulled up a stellar map of the local system. His finger traced a path to a massive gas giant that orbited at the edge of the Helios Gate's gravitational influence. The planet was a swirling mass of hydrogen and helium, its atmosphere thick with volatile compounds. According to the sensor data, there were storm systems in that atmosphere larger than Earth itself. The planet had no strategic value, which was why the Vakresh had ignored it. Jake intended to change that. We are going to use the gas giant as a weapon, he said. Amy stared at him. Sir, I do not understand. How do we weaponize a planet? Jake's smile was grim. We lure as many of their ships as possible into close orbit. Then we detonate our remaining nuclear missiles in the upper atmosphere. The chain reaction should trigger a massive explosion in the planet's hydrogen layer. Any ship caught in the blast will be destroyed. Amy's eyes widened as she processed the implications. That is insane, sir. The blast radius would be enormous. We might not be able to escape it ourselves. Jake nodded, I know. But right now, insane is all we have left. We need to reduce their numbers dramatically. And this is the only way to do it. Amy was silent for a long moment. Then she straightened in her chair. What are your orders, Commander? Jake turned to Kelly. Open a channel to the Vakresh fleet. I want to talk to Thren again. Kelly worked her controls, and moments later, High Admiral Thren's face appeared on the view screen. The Vakresh commander looked different now. The amusement was gone, replaced by cold fury and something that might have been respect. "Commander Morrison," Thren said, "you have proven yourself a worthy adversary. But this battle is over. You have no ammunition left. Your ship is failing. Surrender now and I will honor my original promise of captivity." Jake shook his head. "I told you before, Admiral. Humans do not surrender, but I am willing to offer you a deal. Withdraw your fleet from human space and I will let you live." Thren's mandibles clicked together in what was definitely anger now. "You let me live. You are one damaged ship. I have 800 vessels. You're in no position to make demands, human." Jake smiled. "You are wrong, Admiral. I am in the perfect position. You see, for the last 18 hours I have been teaching you a lesson. I have been showing you what happens when you underestimate humanity. But I have one more lesson to teach. Come and get me, Thren. I will be waiting at the gas giant." He cut the transmission before the Admiral could respond. "He is coming," Amy said, watching the tactical display. "The entire fleet is moving toward our position." Jake nodded. "That is exactly what I want. Set course for the gas giant, maximum speed. Danny, I need everything you have left." The Defiant turned and accelerated toward the massive planet, its engines blazing at emergency power. Behind them, the Vakresh fleet pursued like a tidal wave of metal and fury. The chase took 3 hours. The Defiant stayed just ahead of the enemy fleet, drawing them deeper into the gas giant's gravity well. Jake watched the sensors carefully, calculating angles and trajectories. He needed the Vakresh ships to commit fully to the pursuit, to surround the gas giant before he could spring his trap. Thren was cautious but determined. He spread his fleet in a wide net, trying to cut off any escape route. When the Vakresh fleet had positioned itself exactly where Jake needed them, he gave the order. "All stop. Launch all remaining missiles on predetermined trajectories into the planet's atmosphere. Set them to detonate on my mark." Amy executed the command without hesitation. The Defiant launched every nuclear missile in its arsenal, sending them streaking down toward the gas giant's turbulent upper atmosphere. The Vakresh fleet, seeing the human ship apparently dead in space, closed in for the kill. Hundreds of warships converged on the Defiant's position, their weapons charging for the final barrage. Jake watched them come, his hand hovering over the detonation control. He waited until the moment was perfect, until the maximum number of enemy ships were committed and could not escape. "Detonate," he said quietly. The nuclear missiles exploded deep in the gas giant's atmosphere. For a fraction of a second, nothing seemed to happen. Then the planet's hydrogen-rich atmosphere ignited. The chain reaction spread with impossible speed, turning the entire upper atmosphere into a sphere of fusion fire. The explosion was beyond anything Jake had imagined. It was as if a new sun had been born in the space of a heartbeat. The shockwave hit the Defiant like a physical blow. The ship tumbled end over end, its shields flaring white as they absorbed energy that should have vaporized the vessel. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Jake heard metal tearing and systems failing. He gripped his chair with both hands as gravity lost all meaning. Through the chaos, he could hear his crew shouting damage reports and emergency procedures. When the ship finally stabilized, Jake pulled himself upright and checked the tactical display. The damage to the Defiant was severe but not fatal. More importantly, the gas giant's explosion had achieved exactly what he had hoped. The display showed empty space where hundreds of Vakresh ships had been moments before. They had been caught in the blast and simply ceased to exist, vaporized by temperatures and pressures that rivaled the heart of a star. "Status report," Jake called out, his voice hoarse. Amy's response was shaky. "Shields are down. Hull breaches on decks 2, 4, and 7. Life support is failing in multiple sections." Danny's voice came through the damaged intercom, distorted by static. "Engines are offline, Commander. The reactor core is critical. I have maybe 30 minutes before it melts down or we lose all power." Jake forced himself to focus despite the ringing in his ears. "Casualties." Lisa's voice was calm, despite the chaos. 16 dead, 32 wounded. "I am doing everything I can, but medical supplies are almost exhausted." Jake felt each death like a knife wound. 16 people who had trusted him, who had followed him into this impossible battle. He wanted to grieve, but there was no time. The Earth fleet materialized like an answer to an impossible prayer. 200 warships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming under the light of distant stars. At their head was the USS Valiant, Admiral Patricia Hayes's flagship, a battlecruiser that represented the pinnacle of human naval engineering. Jake watched them appear on his failing tactical display and felt something he had not allowed himself to feel for nearly a day. Hope. Admiral Hayes's face appeared on the view screen, and Jake saw her expression shift from command authority to shock as she took in the state of his bridge. "Commander Morrison," she said quietly. "Report." Jake tried to stand, failed, and settled for remaining in his damaged chair. "The Defiant is combat ineffective, Admiral. We have engaged the Vakresh fleet for approximately 22 hours. Enemy losses stand at over 500 ships destroyed. Our losses are 16 crew members killed, 32 wounded. The ship has suffered catastrophic damage and will require months of repair work." Admiral Hayes stared at him. 500 ships, Commander." She looked at something off-screen, probably her own tactical displays, then back at Jake. "We monitored your battle from the moment we entered sensor range. Commander, what you and your crew have done here is beyond extraordinary. It is beyond anything in human military history." Jake managed a weak smile. "We did what was necessary, Admiral. The rest is up to you." Hayes nodded sharply. "Get your crew to the escape pods, Commander. We will handle things from here." Jake shook his head. "With respect, Admiral, the Defiant still has one more fight in her." Hayes' expression hardened. "Commander, your ship is falling apart. Your reactor is critical. You have done enough." Jake's voice was firm despite his exhaustion. "Not yet, Admiral. Not until this is finished." Before Hayes could respond, Kelly interrupted. "Admiral, we are receiving multiple transmissions. Not from the Vakresh, from other alien species across the sector." Jake frowned. "What do they want, Ensign?" Kelly's fingers moved across her console, her expression growing more amazed with each transmission she processed. "Sir, they are offering support. The Kryn Collective is pledging 3 ships. The Teller Independence Movement is sending their entire fleet. There are at least a dozen other species responding." Jake felt confusion cut through his fatigue. "I do not understand. Why would other species help us?" Admiral Hayes' expression shifted to something between pride and wonder. "Because they have been watching, Commander. Your battle has been broadcast across dozens of star systems. The Vakresh Empire has controlled this entire region through fear and intimidation for centuries. Other species have wanted to resist but never believed they could win. You just showed them it is possible." The communication console lit up with incoming transmissions from across the sector. Kelly tried to keep up with the flood of messages. "The Delthani are broadcasting support for humanity. The Vorn clans say they are attacking Vakresh supply lines. Sir, there are reports of rebellions breaking out on Vakresh-controlled worlds." Jake realized with growing astonishment what had happened. The Defiant's impossible stand had not just delayed an invasion, it had ignited a powder keg that had been waiting for a spark. High Admiral Thren's face appeared on the view screen, interrupting the moment. His expression was unreadable, those alien eyes reflecting calculations that Jake could only guess at. "Commander Morrison, Admiral Hayes," the Vakresh Admiral said formally. "I wish to discuss terms." Admiral Hayes leaned forward. "You invaded human space without provocation, Admiral Thren. You threatened Earth with destruction. What terms do you imagine we might discuss?" Thren's mandibles clicked together slowly. "I have watched Commander Morrison fight for nearly a full day. I have lost over half my fleet to a single human vessel. I now face not just Earth's fleet, but potential rebellion across a dozen systems. The mathematics have changed." Hayes' voice was cold. "What are you proposing?" Thren was silent for a moment. "Complete withdrawal from human space, a non-aggression pact between the Vakresh Empire and humanity, and safe passage for my remaining ships to return to our territory." Jake watched Hayes consider the offer. He could see her weighing options, calculating risks. Finally she spoke. "I have conditions, Admiral. First, you will leave all weapons and military equipment behind. Second, you will provide full intelligence on your military dispositions to the species currently rebelling against you. Third, you will publicly acknowledge that humanity is not to be threatened or coerced." Thren's eyes seemed to darken. "You ask me to disarm my fleet and betray my empire's strategic secrets?" Hayes did not blink. "I ask you to accept the price of your failed invasion, Admiral. You gambled that you could intimidate humanity into submission. You lost. These are the consequences. Take them or face the combined forces of every species in this sector that you have oppressed. The choice is yours." Jake held his breath. This was the moment where everything could still fall apart. If Thren refused, the battle would continue. The Defiant could not fight anymore, but Earth's fleet would finish what Jake had started. Thren sat motionless for several seconds that felt like hours. Finally, his mandibles spread and what Jake had learned was a gesture of acknowledgement. I accept your terms, Admiral Hayes. The Vakresh Empire will withdraw. We will not return to human space. Hayes nodded. You have 6 hours to comply, Admiral. Any ship that remains after that deadline will be destroyed. Thren's image vanished from the screen. The bridge of the Defiant erupted in cheers, weak and exhausted but genuine. Amy was crying, tears streaming down her face as she laughed. Danny's voice came through the intercom, whooping with joy despite the failing systems around him. Kelly slumped over her console in relief. Jake felt his own eyes burning with tears he had been holding back for an entire day. They had done it. Against impossible odds, they had won. Admiral Hayes smiled at Jake through the view screen. Stand down, Commander. Get your people to safety. We will tow the Defiant home. Jake nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Hayes' expression softened. Commander Morrison, I want you to know something. What you did here today will be studied in military academies for centuries. You took everything we teach about naval warfare and executed it perfectly under impossible circumstances. You made every shot count, every decision matter. You are a credit to Earth and to humanity. Jake found his voice. It was not just me, Admiral. My crew fought with courage beyond anything I could have asked for. They deserve all the credit. Hayes nodded. They will receive it, Commander. All of you will. Now get off that ship before it falls apart around you. Jake turned to his crew. You heard the Admiral. Abandon ship. Everyone to the escape pods. Amy stood slowly. It feels wrong to leave her, sir. After everything the Defiant did for us, Jake understood. The ship had become more than metal and systems. It had become a symbol, a testament to human will and determination. But symbols could be rebuilt. People could not. The Defiant served us well, Lieutenant. But ships can be repaired. Let us make sure all of us survive to see her restored. The crew began the evacuation procedure, moving through damaged corridors toward the escape pod bays. Lisa and her medical staff helped the wounded, ensuring no one was left behind. Jake made his way through the ship one final time, checking each section to ensure it was empty. The Defiant looked like it had fought a war, which it had. Walls were scorched and torn, conduits sparked with electrical fires, the air smelled of smoke and coolant and blood. But the ship had held together through impossible punishment. It had protected its crew when it should have been destroyed a dozen times over. In the engine room, Jake found Danny performing one last check of the failing reactor. The chief engineer looked up as Jake entered, his face streaked with grease and sweat. She is dying, Commander, Danny said quietly. The reactor will go critical in about 15 minutes. Nothing I can do will stop it. Jake put a hand on his shoulder. You kept her running when anyone else would have given up, Danny. You gave us the speed we needed when we needed it. That is all any commander could ask. Danny nodded, wiping his eyes. She was a good ship, sir. The best I ever served on. Jake smiled. She will be again. Come on, time to go. They made their way to the last remaining escape pod. The rest of the crew was already aboard other pods, launched and recovered by the Earth fleet. This final pod was small and cramped, designed for 2 people in emergencies. Jake sealed the hatch and initiated the launch sequence. The pod ejected from the Defiant with a sharp acceleration that pressed them both back into their seats. Through the small viewport, Jake watched his ship grow smaller. The Defiant hung in space, battered and broken, but somehow still defiant. Its name had never been more appropriate. Danny pointed at something on the sensor display. Commander, the Vakresh fleet is withdrawing. They are leaving their weapons behind, just like the Admiral ordered. Jake watched the enemy fleet begin its retreat. Hundreds of vessels that had come to conquer Earth were now fleeing, disarmed and defeated. The escape pod was picked up by a recovery ship from the Earth fleet, and within minutes Jake and Danny were aboard the USS Valiant. Medical personnel immediately tried to take Jake to sickbay, but he waved them off. I need to see my crew first. Make sure they are all accounted for. Admiral Hayes met him in the recovery bay. She did not salute or stand on ceremony. Jake woke to the soft hum of medical equipment and the clean smell of a ship's medical bay. For a moment, he did not remember where he was or what had happened. Then it all came rushing back. The battle, the impossible odds, the victory that should never have been possible. He tried to sit up and pain lanced through his ribs. A gentle hand pushed him back down. Easy there, Commander. Lisa said from beside his bed. "You have 3 cracked ribs, a concussion, and enough bruises to make a medical textbook. You are staying in bed for at least another day." Jake looked at his ship's doctor, noting the tired lines around her eyes. "How long was I out?" "2 days," she replied. "You needed the rest. Your body was running on adrenaline and stubbornness for nearly 24 hours. It finally gave out." Jake processed this information. 2 days meant the immediate crisis was over. The Vakresh had time to complete their withdrawal. The political situation would be stabilizing. But what about his crew? What about the Defiant? As if reading his thoughts, Lisa smiled. "Your crew is recovering well. Most of the injuries were minor. The 16 we lost have been returned to Earth for burial with full honors. As for the Defiant, she is in the repair docks at Earth Orbital Station 3. Jake felt a surge of emotion. The ship was being repaired. She would fly again. "Can I see the crew?" he asked. Lisa nodded. "They have been waiting for you to wake up. Admiral Hayes has been here twice to check on you. Half the fleet wants to meet the man who held off 1,000 ships. You are famous, Commander." Jake groaned. "I was afraid of that." Being famous meant attention, interviews, ceremonies. He had never been comfortable with that kind of spotlight. Over the following days, as Jake recovered, he began to understand the full scope of what had happened during the battle. The engagement had been broadcast across dozens of star systems, transmitted by news services and military observers from multiple species. The recording showed the Defiant's desperate fight from multiple angles, captured by sensor drones and long-range observation platforms. Jake watched some of the footage and barely recognized the battle he had lived through. From the outside, it looked like a carefully choreographed ballet of violence. The Defiant moved with a grace that seemed impossible for a ship its size, weaving through enemy fire and striking with surgical precision. What Jake remembered as desperate improvisation looked like the execution of a brilliant strategic plan. The commentators analyzing the battle spoke of Jake's tactical genius, his innovative use of terrain, his psychological warfare against the Vakresh. He had done none of those things intentionally. He had simply been trying to survive one more minute, one more engagement. Admiral Hayes visited him on the 3rd day of his recovery. She sat in the chair beside his bed with the air of someone who had finally found time to breathe after weeks of crisis management. "The political situation is stabilizing, Commander," she began. "The Vakresh Empire is dealing with rebellions across 8 systems. Their military has been discredited by their failure here. Our intelligence suggests they will be occupied with internal problems for years." Jake absorbed this. "And the other species, the ones who offered support?" Hayes smiled. "The Kryn Collective has proposed a mutual defense pact with humanity. The Teller Independence Movement wants to establish trade relations. We are receiving diplomatic overtures from species we never knew existed. Your battle did more than stop an invasion, Commander. It established humanity as a major power in this region of space." Jake shook his head. "I did not intend any of that, Admiral. I was just trying to buy time for the fleet to arrive." Hayes leaned forward. "That is what makes it so powerful, Jake. You were not trying to make a grand gesture or establish humanity's reputation. You were simply doing your duty as you saw it." That authenticity resonated across the galaxy. Species who have been oppressed by the Vakresh saw a single ship stand up to impossible odds and refuse to surrender. It gave them hope. Over the next weeks, as Jake recovered and returned to duty, he began to meet with his crew and understand how each of them had experienced the battle. Amy confessed that she had been terrified every moment, but had focused on her tactical displays to keep from thinking about the odds. Danny admitted that he had known the engines would fail eventually, and had been preparing for the moment when they would have to abandon ship. Lisa told him about the crew members she had treated during the battle, working in a medical bay that shook with each impact. Each story was different, but they all shared a common thread. None of them had believed they would survive. All of them had chosen to fight anyway. Jake realized that what they had accomplished was not the result of any single person's heroism. It was the cumulative effect of 73 people making the choice to stand and fight when every logical calculation said they should run. That was the real lesson of the Defiant. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to act despite that fear. 6 weeks after the battle, Jake was summoned to Earth for a ceremony. He tried to decline, but Admiral Hayes made it clear that this was not optional. Earth wants to honor what you and your crew accomplished, she told him. You owe it to them to accept that honor gracefully. Jake found himself on a shuttle heading toward Earth's surface, accompanied by his senior staff. Amy sat beside him, looking nervous in her dress uniform. Danny kept adjusting his collar and muttering about how uncomfortable formal occasions were. The ceremony took place at the Naval Memorial in Washington, attended by thousands of people and broadcast to billions more across human space and beyond. Jake stood on a stage with his crew, feeling awkward and out of place. Politicians gave speeches about humanity's spirit and determination. Military leaders spoke of tactical innovation and strategic brilliance. Jake barely heard any of it. He was thinking about the 16 crew members who were not there, whose families sat in the front row with folded flags and tears on their faces. When it was his turn to speak, Jake approached the podium with reluctance. He looked out at the sea of faces, at the cameras recording his every word, at the alien dignitaries who had come to witness this moment. For a second, he considered giving a grand speech about courage and sacrifice. Then he remembered who he was and what the Defiant had really represented. He kept it simple. The Defiant did not win because of superior technology or brilliant strategy, Jake said. We won because 73 people made a choice. We chose to stand when we could have run. We chose to fight when surrender was logical. We chose each other over our own survival. That is all this was. Ordinary people making extraordinary choices because those choices needed to be made. The real heroes are not standing on this stage. They are buried in the ground, remembered by the families who loved them. We just survived to tell their story. The ceremony ended with the presentation of medals and commendations. Jake accepted his with quiet dignity, but he knew that the real reward was seeing his crew alive and healthy. After the official events concluded, he was approached by a young woman in civilian clothes. Commander Morrison, she said softly, I am Sarah Blake. My brother was Ensign Peter Blake. He served on the Defiant. He died during the battle. Jake felt his heart constrict. He remembered Peter Blake, a young man, barely 22, who had been working in engineering when a conduit ruptured during one of the Vakresh attacks. I'm so sorry, Jake said quietly. Your brother was brave and capable. He died doing his duty. Sarah shook her head. I'm not here for an apology, Commander. I am here to say thank you. Peter's last message home said he was proud to serve under you. He said you made him feel like what he did mattered. That is all anyone can ask. Jake spent the next hour talking with the families of his lost crew members. Each conversation was painful but necessary. These people needed to know that their loved ones had not died meaninglessly. They needed to understand that every person aboard the Defiant had played a crucial role in the impossible victory. Jake owed them that much and more. 3 months after the battle, Jake returned to Earth Orbital Station 3 to inspect the repairs on the Defiant. The ship looked almost new, her hull patched and repainted, her systems upgraded with the latest technology. Engineers swarmed over her like dedicated worker bees, but the core of the ship remained the same. Jake walked through the corridors, remembering the battle that had been fought here. The bloodstains were gone, the damage repaired, but the memory lingered. Admiral Hayes found him standing on the bridge, looking out at the Earth below. She is almost ready to fly again, Commander, Hayes said. Another 2 weeks and she will be back in service. We are planning a full refit with improved weapons and defensive systems. The Defiant will be one of the most powerful ships in the fleet. Jake nodded but remained silent. Hayes studied him carefully. What is on your mind, Commander? Jake gestured at the bridge. 73 people stood on this ship and defied an empire, Admiral. We held the line when holding it seemed impossible. But I keep thinking about what that cost. 16 dead, dozens wounded, a ship nearly destroyed. Was it worth it? Hayes was quiet for a long moment before responding. That is the question every commander must answer for themselves, Jake. But I will tell you what I believe. Your stand at the Helios Gate changed the course of history for dozens of species. It prevented an invasion that would have cost millions of lives. The stars stretched endlessly across the viewport as Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiant, his hands clasped behind his back in a posture that had become second nature over 15 years of military service. The ship hummed with the steady rhythm of a well-maintained vessel, its corridors quiet except for the occasional footsteps of crew members moving between shifts. Jake had always found comfort in the predictable routine of patrol duty, the way each day blended into the next with reassuring sameness. Today would shatter that comfort forever. Lieutenant Amy Chen sat at the tactical station, her fingers dancing across the holographic display as she ran diagnostics on the weapon systems. She was young for her rank, barely 30, but Jake had learned to trust her instincts in the year they had served together. Behind her, the rest of the bridge crew maintained their stations with quiet efficiency. Danny Foster, the chief engineer, had just stepped onto the bridge with a coffee cup in hand, his perpetually grease-stained uniform a testament to the hours he spent in the engine rooms keeping the Defiant running at peak performance. The communication console beeped, and Ensign Kelly Wright straightened in her chair. Her expression shifted from routine boredom to sharp attention in an instant. Jake noticed the change immediately and turned toward her station. Kelly's hands moved quickly across her controls, her eyes widening as she processed the incoming transmission. She looked up at Jake with an expression he had never seen on her face before, something between fear and disbelief. "Priority transmission from Earth Command," she said, her voice tight. "Admiral Patricia Hayes requesting immediate secure connection." Jake felt his stomach tighten. Patricia Hayes was not just any admiral. She commanded Earth's entire defensive fleet, and she did not make personal calls to patrol ships unless something catastrophic had happened. He nodded to Kelly, who transferred the transmission to the main view screen. Admiral Hayes appeared before them, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, her uniform immaculate despite what must have been long hours of crisis management. The lines around her eyes seemed deeper than Jake remembered, carved by stress and sleepless nights. She did not waste time with pleasantries. "Commander Morrison, we have a situation. The Vakresh Empire has assembled a fleet at the Helios Gate. Their High Admiral, Thren, has delivered an ultimatum to Earth. They demand our immediate surrender and integration into their empire." Jake felt the bridge go silent. The Vakresh Empire was a name that carried weight across the galaxy. They controlled hundreds of star systems through a combination of overwhelming military force and brutal subjugation of conquered species. Humanity had maintained peaceful but distant relations with them for 2 decades, carefully avoiding any conflict that might draw their attention. Apparently, that strategy had failed. "How many ships?" Jake asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer would be bad. Admiral Hayes did not flinch. 1,000 warships, Commander. They are positioned at the Helios Gate, blocking the primary route between our outer colonies and Earth. Thren has given us 72 hours to respond." Jake heard someone gasp behind him. 1,000 ships represented a force capable of reducing Earth's defenses to rubble. Humanity's entire fleet numbered fewer than 400 vessels, and they were scattered across dozens of star systems, protecting colonies and maintaining trade routes. "What are our orders, Admiral?" Jake asked, keeping his voice steady despite the ice forming in his chest. Hayes leaned forward slightly, her expression grave. "The Defiant is the only Earth vessel within range to intercept before their deadline expires. The rest of our fleet is too far out. We are recalling everyone. But it will take days for even our fastest ships to reach Earth. You have a choice, Commander. You can retreat. Use your faster-than-light engines to jump away and buy us time to assemble a defense. Or you can engage." Jake blinked. Engage? The word seemed absurd. 1 ship against 1,000. It was not a battle. It was suicide. Amy turned in her chair to look at him, her face pale. Danny set his coffee cup down carefully on a console, his usual easy smile gone. The entire bridge crew waited for his response. Jake looked at the Admiral's face on the screen and saw something there that made him pause. She was not ordering him to fight. She was giving him a choice. That meant something. "What happens if we retreat?" Jake asked. Hayes' expression tightened. "Thren will interpret it as weakness. He will press his advantage. Our analysts believe the Vakresh will proceed with an immediate invasion. If we stand and fight, even if we lose, we send a message. We show them that humanity will not be intimidated. We buy time not just for our fleet to assemble, but for our people to prepare. We make them pay a price for their aggression, even a small one." Jake turned away from the screen and looked out at the stars. His mind raced through the implications. Running meant living. Running meant he could see his sister again, could walk on Earth's soil, could maybe retire someday to that cabin in Montana he had always dreamed about. Fighting meant certain death. It meant throwing away his life and the lives of his crew for what amounted to a symbolic gesture. He thought about the 73 people aboard the Defiant, each with their own families, their own dreams, their own futures that would be erased if he gave the wrong order. But he also thought about what it meant to be human. Humanity had clawed its way up from caves and campfires to touch the stars. They had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that should have destroyed them. They had endured because when the moment came, someone always stood up and said no. Someone always refused to kneel. Jake turned back to the Admiral. "We will engage," he said simply. Hayes nodded slowly as if she had expected nothing less but still felt the weight of what she had asked him to do. "Godspeed, Commander Morrison. Earth will remember what you do today." The transmission ended and the view screen returned to the starfield ahead. Jake turned to face his crew. Every eye on the bridge was locked on him. He took a breath and made his voice firm and clear. "All hands, this is the commander. Battle stations. Plot a course for the Helios Gate, maximum speed. We have an appointment with the Vakresh Empire." Amy stood from her station, her chin lifted. "Permission to speak freely, sir." Jake nodded. "We cannot win this fight, Commander. The math does not work. 1 ship against 1,000. We will die." Jake met her eyes. "Yes, Lieutenant, we probably will, but we will die standing. We will die fighting, and maybe, just maybe, we will make them remember that humans do not surrender. Not to empires, not to tyrants, not to anyone." Danny stepped forward, his face set with determination. "The engines can handle whatever you need, Commander. I will push them past every safety limit if that is what it takes." Lisa Grant, the ship's doctor, had entered the bridge during the Admiral's transmission. "I will have sickbay ready," she said quietly. Jake looked around at them, these people who had chosen to follow him into certain death without hesitation. "Thank you," he said, and meant it more than any words he had ever spoken. The Defiant turned in space, its engines flaring to life as it accelerated toward the Helios Gate. Behind them, Earth spun in the darkness, unaware that its fate now rested on the shoulders of 73 people aboard a single warship. Jake settled into the command chair and pulled up the tactical display. 1,000 red dots appeared on the screen, clustered at the Helios Gate like a swarm of angry hornets. 1 blue dot represented the Defiant. The odds were impossible. The outcome seemed predetermined. But Jake Morrison smiled grimly as his ship jumped to faster-than-light speed. Humanity was about to teach the galaxy a lesson about impossible odds.